thank you very much for joining us, and I think little by little more people will join us. And this global conversation, I think we have been thinking about it for some time, and a lot of discussions back and forth because of the political sensitivities around this topic and around the region as well. And thanks to Ambassador Rekha, who kind of encouraged me to go ahead and share with me his book and said, okay, why don't we do it? And we'll see where we go with that. So this is going to be roughly 2-hour conversation, maybe shorter as well. So I want to start by saying good morning from New York to all those, anybody out there, different places. And so I want to start by saying special thanks to Isabella Soraya and Christine Munch, who kind of helped me behind the scenes doing all the work, technical support. Can you mute everybody? So, first of all, I want to also thank our dean, Dr. Luca Iandoli, and would like him to give some opening remarks. But just to briefly introduce him, so that he's a dean of the Collins College of Professional Studies and professor in the Division of Computer Science, Mathematics and Science. Dr. Iandoli served as an associate professor at the University of Naples, Federico II in Italy, and is visiting research professor at Stevens Institute of Technology. He was Fulbright visiting scholar at the Center for Collective Intelligence at the MIT. Dr. Iandoli currently research focuses on online interaction and collaboration might be leveraged to help groups, organizations, communities, and companies aggregate and store dispersed knowledge, increase creativity, innovation, and problem solving, and support large-scale collective intelligence. Dr. Iandoli has served as the president of the International Council for Small Business for the term of 2016 to 17. So may I kindly request Dr. Iandoli to make some welcoming remarks?
Thank you so much, Basilio. Thanks for inviting me. This is a great event. First of all, I wanna thank all the participants. Thanks so much for being with us today. And good morning, good afternoon to everybody, depending on where you are. And I wish to thank Dr. Monteiro because of his, I call it intellectual activism, and he's always a great. He always has great ideas and a lot of stimuli for us to think and work around big topics like in this case soft power and peace building, which of course is a great topic also for our programs here in international communication and a PhD in multi-sector communication, just to name two of them. Next, I want to thank you very much, the Consul General of the Republic of Kosovo and Dr. Rekha, Ambassador, for not just for being here, but also for your continuous support, because this is a conversation that we have initiated already, since a few years, and is moving forward, and without your support and engagement would not be possible. I'm also very happy to have here Mr. Kahani, successful entrepreneur and also alum, St. John's alum. I really love to hear about how innovation contributes to soft power. And then Ms. Daniela Milic, our PhD student, our PhD in multi-sector communication, of course, Dr. Mark Cusack, associate professor in the Department of Mass Communication at St. John's University. So my background, I was telling before, Ambassador Rekha, is not in communications, not in political science, so I'm really not an expert in the topic today. So my understanding of the importance of soft power in diplomacy as a non-expert is that it seems evident that, of course, in the short term, hard power is more effective because you can always force someone to do something, or you can provide incentives, economic bargaining to do something, and that's in the short term is very effective and more impactful, but it does work in the long term. So if you want something sustainable and durable, you have to engage and combine maybe the hard power with a lot of investment in soft power. And I think we have many examples in history in which this was clearly the case. It was when the Soviet Union marketed itself, even if Soviets would not really like the word marketing, but marketed itself like different superior society model, or when the U.S. eventually won the Cold War, and not just because of their economic strength, but also because they were a model, and the pursuit of the American dream is part of that. We were talking about coffee, Italian espresso. That's maybe a little expression of soft power as well, if it's a proxy for what culture means and the influence of culture and cultural tradition in that arena. So I'm really intrigued to learn more about this topic, and I'm going to stop here, and I look forward to hear from the expert about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Iandoli, and we are grateful for your ongoing support for this kind of little crazy ideas that I come up with. And so I just want to begin by saying that this conversation, this is not a political conversation. I want to emphasize that part. This is a humanitarian conversation, searching common ground among and between us humans, and discover and celebrate common bonds in Balkan region. This idea to hold a grand conversation is a product of a long conversation with Ambassador Ilba Kirsiu, who is currently developing an academy for junior diplomats at Kosovo Foreign Affairs Ministry. His attempts to explore new ideas led him to organize workshops on low-profile diplomacy, and I was glad to participate and lead some of those workshops. And how small nation-states could optimize in the world where technology reshapes geopolitics. We are familiar with Joseph Nye's term, soft power, and this soft, perhaps smart power, projects values, ideals, culture across borders to foster goodwill and strengthen partnerships, which engages the civil society. While we are witnessing disintegration of the existing international order, it's important to look at our little corners where historical, cultural affinities are easily shared, and thus celebrate them and build a better future. So for today's global conversation, I'm pleased to introduce you to our Ambassador Dr. Blerian Rekam, and he has an impressive background, and I'm going to brief his life work that he has done. He's a Consul General of Kosovo at New York Consulate. He's a well-known scholar in the field of international public law, international relations, and public relations. He was candidate for President of the Republic of North Macedonia, Ambassador to the European Union in Brussels, and Minister of European Integration of the Republic of Kosovo. He has authored over 20 books, and the most recent one is Balkan Geopolitics from Cold War to Hot Peace, if anybody can see that. So I'm pleased to welcome you, Ambassador, and the other speaker, and we take great pride and delight to introduce, is Mirgam Kahani. He's the founder and CEO of Giraffa Inc. Giraffa is one of the fastest growing tech companies in Central Europe, according to Deloitte Fast, and also in a high position in CE, with a mission to build the internet economy in the Balkan region. Giraffa's ecosystem of services encompasses e-commerce, video streaming, online marketing, cloud computing, and entertainment production, and it is one of the most well-funded tech startups in Europe. Previously in New York, Mirgim worked for Broadreach Financial Solutions, and also was an adjunct professor at St. John's University, and an executive management consulting program at Morgan Stanley. And regionally, Mirgim was teaching at various universities, was president of the Board of Governors at the American Chamber of Commerce in Kosovo, a board member of ATOM Institute and GAP Institute, and advisory board member of several startups, accelerators, and funds. His education includes a BS and MS degree in computer science and an MBA in management from St. John's University in New York. So we are very proud of him, and I'm delighted that he's joining us today. And the other speaker, who is also comes with a very interesting background, is Daniela Milik. Daniela, with over 25 years of experience in international human resources, she's dedicated human resources policies officer at the United Nations. And more importantly, I say, a PhD candidate in multi-sector communication at St. John's University, where she explores the intersections of communication, culture, and policy in diverse, complex contexts. One of her core competencies, among many, is policy development, especially in the area of people management, leadership and development, including women empowerment, mental health and well-being, especially in the humanitarian and development sectors. She serves as the vice chair of RMEO, an association that fosters learning and innovation in HR management for international organizations. I'm also pleased to introduce to you the other presenter today. He is my colleague, Dr. Mark Yushak. He's a tenured associate professor in digital media and innovation. He's a well-known researcher with over 9 years of teaching experience. And he's quite involved in our PhD program, kind of keeps a close eye on that, particularly in that thing called multi-sector dimension of it. And he has published extensively in peer-reviewed journals, also in chapters in various books, and he has business cases with Sage Publishing. He's inventor with 1 patent filed in the USPTO and 2nd invention under review. He has 16 years experience as a practitioner, consultant in knowledge management, digital media epistemology, strategic communication, and scientific media. So I'm pleased to introduce you, our presenters today. And I'm also pleased to introduce you to Arturo Pagan. He's the Deputy Director, Human Resources at UNFPA, at the United Nations, and most importantly, he's doctoral candidate in multi-sector communication at St. John's University. And he will be co-moderating today's conversation. I kindly request all of you to please remain muted to avoid clash of sounds, and send your questions via the chat box. And now, may I invite Ambassador Blaine Reka to speak for about 15 minutes, and then we'll open up for conversations afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vasilio, Dean Dr. Landoli, and Dr. Yusak. Dear participants of today's conference, Balkan Soft Power. It's a great pleasure to speak on this innovative concept of international relations of Professor Joseph Nye. Today, of course, within the Balkan context. Of course, I am not authorized to speak for other countries in the region, but only for the Kosovo soft power. Kosovo is the youngest European state and a successful democratic nation-building story. Last week, on 17 February, we celebrated 17th anniversary of our independence. We could proudly say that Republic of Kosovo is the most pro-democratic country in the region, based on all international reports: Freedom House, VDM Institute, Reporters Sans Frontières, Transparency International, Corruption Index, Henley Passport Index, Global Passport, and so on and so on. We have not only our beautiful nature and our natural resources, but also our rich human capital. The youngest population in the Europe, well-educated, absolute English-speaking, and high IT-skilled new generation. The Republic of Kosovo used modern tools like cultural, sport, tourism, conference diplomacy, and digital diplomacy as a soft power tool. ICT sector play an important role in enhancing the Kosovo soft power, its ability to influence international perception through technology, culture, and innovation. Kosovo young and dynamic population, strong diaspora connection, and growing digital economy are significant potential to boost the country's influence. Emerging as a tech outsourcing hub for European and American companies, Kosovo improved its reputation as a competitive ICT provider. Success story of Kosovo ICT improved the country's image globally, promoting it as a place of talent and innovation. Kosovo ICT sector remains one of the most important pillars of its soft power, promoting innovation, economic growth, and global connectivity. Although a small country, Kosovo gave famous world singers like Dua Lipa, Rita Ora, golden Olympic winner like Mylinda Kelmendi, and not last by important, but very important, will host Mediterranean Game Pristina 2030. So thank you for your attention. I'm ready to answer to your question and to communicate in this very important topic.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm trying to fix the things here. Thank you very much, Dr. Reka. And now may I invite Megan Kahani to please share your thoughts with us.
Hello. Did you hear me?
Yeah. Just give me 1 minute.
There's an echo or not?
Yeah, there's an echo.
There's an echo.
How about now?
Yeah. Oh yeah. How do I get him?
I think there's a volume control on the panel
Replace
on the
me.
door as well.
I think the
On the
echo
wall.
should be on the end there.
No, on the white panel on the wall,
Yeah.
there's a volume control. If you stand up,
Wait, which one?
that one, yeah.
Okay. Just a moment, Megan.
Test,
Raising the volume here. Yeah.
test. This is good now. I think.
Sitting at the echo.
This is interesting. We're speaking about innovation, and we are having some issues with innovation itself. It's a pleasure to be here. Professor Basilio, thank you so much for the invitation. Ambassador, dear participants, dear members being here. For me, it's a special occasion to be here for St. John's because, as Professor mentioned, I'm 2 times alumni from College of Professional Studies, but also the MBA piece. And as an administrator, as an adjunct, so St. John's, I spent 10 years of my life at St. John's. So being part of events at St. John's University holds a special part in my heart. I wanted to be there physically with you. Sorry for not being able to make it there, but it's still, I'm happy to be joining remotely from Pristina now. And to the other participants, other professors, and or students, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So I look forward to getting some questions and raising a discussion around innovation and soft power. So it's interesting times. Speaking about soft power, as traditionally was seen from culturally, education, or other forms of political diplomacy as a soft power, and now moving towards more innovation and technology, or innovation and technology being part of the soft power concept. It's at the right time for St. John's too. We have Rick Pitino with St. John's basketball team making waves historically, as we have not seen it since 81 or 84 and 85 record. So the basketball waves United States, I think, is doing a certain impact to St. John's University as well. From the tech perspective, maybe I could go in particular showing from Kosovo and Balkans in particular for the region, because that's where we are focused. Back in 2012, I came back from the States and we started Giraffa with the mission to build the internet economy in the region. We started doing that because we realized that no other major players are actually paying attention to this region that much. The region, although in the part of Europe, it has been neglected by not just investors, but it has been neglected by major corporations at large. And eventually, the team and I realized that if somebody has to do something about the region, it's us. So eventually, everything comes around the people taking initiatives and creating certain innovation technology to help and grow the region forward. Today, for Giraffa, for instance, we create product right in this office here in Pristina that are being used in the United States, in Czech Republic, in France, in Indonesia. But luckily for us in Kosovo, it's not just Giraffa. In Kosovo, we have some outstanding companies. I'll mention a few. You have Code Labs. It's a US Kosovo company out of Detroit, and they have their engineering office in Kosovo. They fundraised over $40 million. They serve clients all over the world, in particular the United States. One of their biggest clients is the federal government of the United States. Then we have 91 Life, AI medicine, precision medicine. Their main engineering office is in Kosovo. Tide, 80 million fundraising, engineering office and sales in Kosovo. Radix, Celonis, and you name it. Celonis is a good example, which is lastly valued $13 billion. One of their engineering offices is in Pristina. So you have a lot of companies that operate globally, but the innovation, the technology, it's actually shows that this region, Kosovo, and the region has the capacity to produce more. Just like the ambassador says, although we operate in Kosovo, Albania, and North Macedonia, my personal knowledge is more focused in Kosovo as well, but I don't see Albania and North Macedonia too far behind as well. In terms of the investment, second impact or second perspective in the soft power, we have fundraised over 20 million right now with Jirafa, and that has helped to open the border and exposure from other companies and other investors to look at the region. Look at some of the most prominent brands in the world. We worked with them before we didn't. So you take any of the big brands that you can think of, or Apple, Samsung, Asus, you name it. And because of this international exposure when it comes to investments, we are considered as a reliable partner to work with them. So this is opening doors going forward. Another perspective where innovation impacts and has a positive influence on the soft power for a country and the region at large is on the entrepreneurship and the ecosystem culture. Some of the biggest accelerators in the world, Endeavor, which is US-based but works globally, we as Jirafa are part of it, and we participated in through Endeavor Bulgaria. There is none in Kosovo right now. The closest is Bulgaria and Greece. They have an accelerator program called Dare to Scale, and we were their official partner for Kosovo and North Macedonia to push this forward. 500 Startups, it's another accelerator that we are working closely with them to bring it in the region so that this influence and it allows these accelerators access to talents, ideas, and startups, but it gives the entrepreneurs an opportunity to work with some of the largest accelerators in the world. Lastly, but not least, we have so many to talk about, but this is an important one. Positioning Kosovo and the region on the global map. And there are different ways to do this. Things such as participating in different conferences and different initiatives that have to do with foreign direct investments, that have to do with startup, technology, and innovation. It has to do with attracting highly valuable investments. We recently announced that we closed an investment, the very first investment in Kosovo, a direct investment from DFC, the US federal fund, who invested in Jirafa just in December. This is very recent, and that's the very first direct investment from DFC. DFC is one of the largest investors in the world when it comes to investing in not just technology, they invest sector agnostic, but for us that was an important step forward because it does put Kosovo in the map in front of venture capitalists of the United States, private equity, and other investors in the Western Europe. So I think innovation technology has a big role to play alongside other influential soft power mechanisms that have been known so far. And the team and I and other companies, we are not the only ones, but there are several companies in Kosovo and the region who actually do play a particular good role. I'll close with this. In the New York Times, in the arts section, there used to be a cover page with a photo of the Hotel Grand in Pristina. That photo, Hotel Grand Pristina, is from former Yugoslavia, socialist type of architecture. Tito used to stay there. And the headline on the cover page of art section in New York Times, you can find it in Google. It said, "This may not be the worst hotel looking in the world, but the world is there." So this is the prejudice that the region and Pristina and Kosovo and the whole region faces when we speak to foreign investors and when we speak to foreign partners. It's just we don't have that. And I think it's unfair because the reality, it's much better than the perception. It's misperception. We are much stronger. We are a good economy, good talent. Rule of law is very high. We've never had any problems of any sort. In fact, it's much easier to open a business, say, in Kosovo now than maybe in any random country in Europe. So there are advantages, but the influence hasn't reached to that point. So I'm very happy that team and I and other ecosystem players from the ICT sector are actually contributing and playing a role towards improving this image. Thank you very much for opening. I look forward to continuing this discussion.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. It was so delightful to hear from you, and we'll come on back with the questions and discussions a little later on. And now, may I invite Daniela to share your thoughts with us, coming from Montenegro.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, hi everybody. It's really nice to see you all. I regret that I'm not with you in person. I actually miss New York. I miss St. John's, but I am sending you warm regards from Geneva and from the International Organization for Migration, which I think is fitting given that I'm call myself a migrant and a global nomad and many other things that I think many of us in this call can relate to. But it's just really a sheer pleasure to and privilege to stand here with you and to talk about maybe a little bit a different topic. For me, it is the storytelling and the storytelling in the Balkan spirit. And what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my personal journey and how I'm kind of my identity that comes from, well, nowadays Montenegro has been changed several times as the course of history would have it, and sort of this global lens that I bring in. So maybe a little bit unconventional. Professor Monteiro has this ability to co-opt rather than coerce his students into engaging in all sorts of initiatives. So I said yes to this before I even knew what I was going to talk about. So, and as I was thinking about it, it's been morphing into my head as to what is something that I can offer that perhaps is maybe unique or sort of a voice of what I have to bring. So while I think Professor Monteiro has that soft power of co-opting people, I would hope to add a bit of a storytelling to this. But before I begin, I just want to take a step back. And I've been puzzled a little bit when I was approached to talk about the topic on the Balkans. I want to take us back to a time in my life when the word Balkan did not really feature in my vocabulary. I grew up not as a Balkanite, I grew up as a Yugoslav. So besides dating myself, I'm taking you back a half a century ago to a time when my country, as I learned in school, was simply a country in, quote unquote, Southeast Europe. It wasn't until I moved to the United States that I started hearing this term of Balkan used more frequently. So question for me was it a new name for Yugoslavia or ex-Yugoslavia? Sometimes I was called a person who is nostalgic from a country that once was, perhaps not. I don't know, but I was wondering what did that actually mean? Was it a broader term for the entire peninsula, which encompasses more than just the former Yugoslav republics? But whatever the meaning, one thing is certain. As a storyteller, I'm going to tell you that Balkan comes from the Turkish word for mountain. So in many ways, that is very fitting, because mountains divide and protect. They challenge us to climb them, they inspire us, but they also hold history in their slopes and resilience in their peaks. So I come from a country called Montenegro. Mountain is in its name, and I think that very much speaks also to our character quite a bit. So as a Montenegrin born in Yugoslavia, now a nomad who has lived abroad for the past 34 years in about 8-9 countries, I really stand here today and talk to you today not just as someone who's been shaped by those mountains and the sea where I grew up, but also as somebody who tries to carry the stories of my people beyond and across the borders. And I think those stories, to me, are the most powerful form of the soft power that the Balkans has to offer. Maybe that's presumptuous of me to say that, but that's something that I really fundamentally believe. So while I'm not a historian or a diplomat, I guess I work for the United Nations, but I'm an international civil servant, so I don't represent any of my countries whose passport I held, so to speak. I was a Yugoslav, I was for a period of time Serbo-Montenegrin, now Montenegrin. I'm still the very same person, no matter what administratively these changes happen, but I'm very excited that now we have a bigger number of nations and bigger collaboration than we had before. So I could call myself a cultural diplomat, certainly, through food, through music, through arts, but as a storyteller and a poet and a global citizen, I'm shaped by the rhythms and of the region that is known both to profound pain and also remarkable resilience. So what I would like to tell you a bit about is take you very, very locally from somebody who sort of has this global prism to a town called Bar. That is a very small town in a very small Montenegro. But what is really unique about my town, not only it has a very universal name, B-A-R, Bar, you cannot misspell it, you cannot mispronounce it, but what is very interesting about my town is that this is a place with three religions, Orthodox Christianity, Catholic Christianity, and Islam have coexisted peacefully for centuries. And the sites of an Orthodox church standing near a Catholic cathedral, not far from a mosque, is a reminder of this rich tapestry and the coexistence that Balkans can embody. So Bar is not just my hometown, I see it as a microcosm of the Balkan spirit and a testament to the possibilities of harmony and diversity. And I know oftentimes we've heard at least a lot of people who, when they talk about our region, talk about wars, talk about bloodshed, talk about all these other things, but I really think there's a lot to be said about our rich milieu, our harmony in our diversity. So one thing that I would like to mention is that throughout the history, the Balkans have been the crossroads of all civilizations, different civilizations, the bridges between the East and the West. And that unique position is also reflected in our literature and in powerful form of storytelling that reveals the soul of our people. So if you allow me to just highlight a few writers, each representing one of the three major faiths that I just mentioned, and perhaps you've heard some of them, perhaps not, but their works have had profound insights into our region's identity. They have been widely translated also into other languages. One, no doubt, that you know about is Ivo Andrić. Ivo Andrić was an Orthodox Christian. He's the Nobel Prize winner and author of The Bridge on the Drina, the Ladrini Ćuprija in the original language. And it's used, his works, to explore the complex relationship between different ethnic and religious groups in the Balkans. So the bridge in his novel becomes a symbol of both the connection and the division, and encapsulates the region's struggles and aspirations. If you ever have a chance to go visit this bridge, it's probably one of the most masterful works of architecture that you will see. Again, I'm very proud of where I come from, so if I'm exaggerating, I hope you will pardon me that. The second one I wanted to mention is Marin Držić. Marin Držić is a Catholic Christian, a Croatian. He's often called the Shakespeare of Dubrovnik. He was a 16th century writer, and his comedies and dramas shed light on human nature, on politics, on societal norms. And he was very witty in his writing, and his insights remind us that even in times of turmoil, the arts, the literature can inspire unity and reflection. And we actually studied him in literature when I was growing up. And the third one is probably one of my favorite writers of all time. His name is Nesha Selimovic. He was a Muslim, and his masterpiece was called Death and the Dervish. And it's really a deeply philosophical novel that grapples with themes of justice, of loyalty, of personal conscience. It reflects the inner conflicts of an individual navigating the pressures of a fractured society, and which is sort of a metaphor for the Balkans experience. So these writers, though they come from different backgrounds, to me, I highlight them today because to me they share a common thread. They all use storytelling to bridge divides, to illuminate the human condition, to give voices to the complexity of life in the Balkans. And even though they wrote in different centuries, you can kind of see this story of Balkan endurance, perseverance, spite. We often say that we're very stubborn, we're very determined, we're very optimistic as people, I would say, that no matter what happens, our spirit continues and thrives. So Bar itself carries a very a historical significance because it was a vital port during the Venetian Republic. Later on became part of the Ottoman Empire. It served as a crossroads of trade, culture, and ideas. It is home to the old olive tree, which is said to be over 2,000 years old. And it's really, every time I pass by the tree, I see it as a silent witness to centuries of history, and also the symbol of resilience and rootedness. So even as borders have been shifting and empires rose and fell, even in my 50 years on this earth, like as I said, borders were shrinking and enlarging, my hometown reminds me that there is a place where people of different faiths and traditions live side by side, no matter what the political arrangement can be or have been. And this peaceful coexistence offers a lesson, I believe, not only to the Balkans, but for the world. The diversity, when we embrace it, can actually be an incredible source of strength. So for me, the storytelling is a soft power, although I personally do not like word soft because somehow it implies weak. I call that superpower. So I think this greatest asset for us is not really in the past conflicts, but in the ability to tell stories of hope, resilience, innovation, connection. And I'm really pleased to have heard some of the previous speakers who talked about that. There is more to the Balkans than what has been reported in the news. Whether we have greatest hotels or not, that to me is much less important than whether we have great hearts that have been embracing different people from across the globe for centuries. So storytelling as a form of soft power that allows us to reclaim and reshape the narrative about our region. I think we owe it to our region, we owe it to our ancestors, we owe it to our future generation to tell different types of stories. And through literature, through art, even to these personal anecdotes and stories, I think we can present a more nuanced image of the Balkans to the world, and the one that celebrates creativity, innovation, diversity, humanity. And as somebody who works in the United Nations for the last 25 years, I have witnessed how the power of storytelling can bridge the divides, can build the bridges. And a well-told story can humanize the abstract, can foster empathy, can inspire action. So for the Balkans, to me, this means not only sharing the stories of our struggle, but also celebrating the stories of our triumphs, of our musicians, of our singers, of our Olympic gold medal winners, or any of the other stories that fall into that cultural diplomacy piece that I think previous speakers also touched upon. So I always like to end with a call for action. So today I basically invite each one of you to think about the stories that define you, your community, your region, your school, your village, whatever that your environment is. What narratives can we share to build bridges, to challenge some of these stereotypes, and also to inspire collaboration? And how can we, as storytellers, amplify the voices of the Balkans to make them heard across the world? So may we, and I say the royal we here, the storytellers of the Balkans, continue to use our voices to foster the understanding and belonging within our region and also beyond. So I hope you don't mind me sharing something so deeply personal in this kind of forum, but this is actually what Balkans and what storytelling as a soft power means to me. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. It is wonderful to hear, and very refreshing to hear that, the power of the storytelling. And today we talked about storytelling all the more. And I think this is something to celebrate from the perspective that you offer. So now may I invite my colleague, Dr. Mark Yusak, to please on the complexity of the thing.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I have a very strange topic to talk about, and I'm going to talk about it by introducing a scenario. It's the year 1980, and a gentleman, let's call him Bob.
Please spin.
He gets off a plane at LaGuardia Airport, has luggage, exits the terminal, walks out of the airport and down a street in Queens. He sees a nice, typical house, goes up to the front door of the house, knocks on the door. The man opens the door, and we can hear in the background children screaming, the wife making dinner. And Bob says to the man, he says, "Excuse me, I'm a complete stranger, but I would like to sleep in one of your spare bedrooms tonight. Would you mind?" We would consider Bob insane if it was the year 1980. We'd say, that's crazy. Why would the homeowner let him in? Most likely he would consider Bob not fully there. So why does this work today? Every day, all over the world, people pay and sleep in strangers' homes. What's changed? Airbnb and other apps, they haven't created the homes. They haven't created the travelers. They haven't created more trusting strangers. And yet, strangers by the millions are entering and sleeping in each other's homes. What has changed? For all the fancy language we might confer as media scholars or economists or theorists, one thing now exists that enables this type of strange interaction between strangers to occur. We might be tempted to say it's a cell phone, but it's not the cell phone alone. We might be tempted to say it's the app, it's Airbnb, but it's not the app either. It's actually the process complexity that both together enable. Let me explain. Bob ringing the bell is a stranger. Bob on the app is a customer. What's the difference? Although they're both strangers to each other, Bob and the homeowner have extensive real-time information about each other. They have ratings, they have reviews. There is a public record of their private selves that enables a transaction of tremendous trust to occur between strangers. That process complexity doesn't mean things are complicated. Rather, it means the kind of trust it might often take years to develop between people can be reframed as a kind of proxy. A complex process of posting, getting reviews, getting information, having photographs, what the bed looks like, etc., makes the foreign and unknown, the intimate and the familiar. And these two perfect strangers are able to sleep relaxed in the same house and probably even use the same bathroom without too much of a problem. So, a forum about Balkan soft power is a strange place to talk about Bob and Airbnb. But it is a very familiar place to talk about process complexity, because the very nature of the Balkans as a successful and enduring amalgamation of small states is contingent upon each of the states acknowledging in various forms that process complexity. One of the better examples I know of, and I'm sure there are many more, is the use of the asterisk as part of the Brussels Agreement. I'm not interested in this talk about the politics of the asterisk or the way in which EU accession talks between the EU, Serbia, and Kosovo affect broader politics. I'm simply interested in the fact that the asterisk represents a kind of acknowledged process complexity. What the Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek would refer to as an unknown known. I know, but I don't want to know, so I pretend not to know. One of his favorite lines, right? In this case, however, this tacit not knowing creates a space for deeper and truer discussion. The asterisk, in this sense, is not a political compromise. It is a way to accept process complexity. Okay, soft power. Right? It's in the title. I promised to talk about soft power. I probably should talk about it somewhere along the lines. Soft power was developed by Joseph Nye. Nye presents the concept through a historical lens, where he argues for the relevance of soft power, not only as a counter to military or hard power, but as a uniquely useful form of power given certain new technological modalities that have become part of the global world order. The significance of these modalities, according to Nye, is not just a result of technological change. It is part of a broader reframing of power and economic wealth in the world, shifting from ownership of raw materials to ownership of ideas. The exercise of soft power, however, is contingent on the parties involved accepting process complexity. Why is this the case? Well, because without process complexity, two things happen. Interactions are forced into a kind of instantaneous transactional space, and the dignity of parties cannot be guaranteed or preserved. We are left in a world fighting for transactional fairness without being able to have meaningful work occur about the long-term future. In order to see how these two things fit together, there's one last piece of the puzzle that we have to introduce: the concept of dignity. Dignity isn't static. While it is argued that it is an inherent aspect of humanity, I would argue that it is only meaningful to define dignity when its absence is observed. In other words, what we are looking at is not dignity as an attribute, but the persistence of it in a given situation. For it is only in a dynamic moment where it is lost it becomes significant. And it is only when it is lost that we can ask the question, upon what is its persistence dependent? In other words, what must be independent of a particular human culture that allows dignity to persist? And the answer is simple. The persistence of dignity is contingent on process complexity. Dignity in this regard has a specific trait. It is fragile. It is a construct at the border of individual freedom and communal responsibility. When the expression of individual freedom is aligned with community norms and cultural practices, it appears strong. Its exercise comes with social approval. But when its exercise is even marginally constrained, its fragility is revealed. Those states that rely on soft power to exercise their will within the community of nations are like those individuals who are acting on the boundaries of global norms. They want something new. They want something different. A new kind of independence. A new kind of rights. A new kind of agreement. More rights. Different rights. Different opportunities. And it is precisely at the point of expressing that difference that their dignity as nations becomes fragile. Its persistence, therefore, is reliant on process complexity, on both parties agreeing that disagreeing is okay, however, agreeing that the process of achieving an outcome is as important, if not more so, than the outcome itself. A note on this might help shed light on the importance of this difference. The second story, not about Bob or Airbnb. The US is a young culture, but it is the oldest continuous government in the world. Its constitution is not perfect. It has been amended multiple times. It is not designed for many problems in the modern world, yet it persists. But if we look back at its origins through the lens of process complexity, a different and more nuanced picture emerges. The men who gathered, the 56 men who gathered in Philadelphia in the summer of 1787 to amend the Articles of Confederation government were believers in process complexity. It took weeks and weeks. Poor James Madison, he had to wait 3 weeks for other attendees to arrive. He couldn't call them. There was no cell phone. He had to wait. And as he waited, he thought about what was going to happen next. It took weeks and weeks with committees and subcommittees and arduous rules of order. This was the most important feature of that convention. How many rules there were for communication. For that group of men to produce a document that was only 4 pages long. It then took a year of spirited debate in the Federalist Papers, scattered across the colonial newspapers, for those 4 pages to be individually voted upon and ratified by the individual citizens and then by the individual states. The process was horrific. They didn't have air conditioning. It took a long time to write answers in the Federalist Papers. Delaware was the first to ratify the Constitution, although the process dragged on and on. But by the end of it, it wasn't 4 pages written by several dozen men. It was a compact agreed to by an entire society. Those men had no hard power to persuade the farmers and new Americans. Their only tool was soft power. Their logic, their reason, their strenuous debates, their attempt at creating a new and original rule of law, rooted in a weird system of checks and balances. Soft power is perhaps mislabeled, for hard implies something bigger, better, and more effective. But we do not long remember, nor are we long inspired, by those actions forced upon us. Rather, we remember who inspired us, who created within us the spark to act and bring our voices to a public sphere. As such, it is soft power that is a true real power within any community. And it's only effective if there is significant process complexity that adjudicates and manifests itself throughout any endeavor to reach understanding. Bob could in fact stay at a neighbor's house without a cell phone or an app if there was an analog version of Airbnb. There could have been. There could have been a central repository. There could have been some weird version of it. We had automated airline ticket reservation systems in 1968 in the U.S. So we had versions of these things a long time ago. But it would still require that same kind of process complexity to function. I want to end by mentioning one point here about foreign direct investment in small states and their relationship to process complexity. We often look at the U.S. From one lens and are horrified by it, how litigious American society is. We spend 13% of our GDP on lawyers. It's an incredible amount of money to spend on law firms. And a lot of Europeans look at our funny ads for, malpractice insurance, hit and run drivers, right? 1-800 call Bob the lawyer. 13%. But that 13% actually, in another way, guarantees a process complexity so that anybody, at any moment in time, if they're in any way stripped of their rights and their dignity, they have a chance to correct it. And that gives them a certainty in the long term that matters tremendously in development. So I'm a very big believer in general in going past the mere question of outcomes, what happened. I'm much more interested in how it happened. And I think that if we change and take a sideways glance and look at process complexity, we'll have a much better understanding of both where the Balkans are today and where they can be in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I see that we have a professor from Harvard University, Faton Limani. May I request Professor Limani to please share your thoughts? I'm sorry, that's kind of last moment, but to put you on the spot there. Could you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we do. Yes. Professor Limani is from Albania, so but he's a professor at Harvard University. Pin him.
I'm from Kosovo. I teach. I'm a department administrator at Harvard, and I teach Albanian also at Harvard. So, but outside of Harvard, I teach leadership, and a lot of this, what was said today, it resonates a lot with my leadership work. Especially, I like what the last speaker said about process complexity. You have to when you are working in a complex environment, you have to be able to work with a lot of complexity and be able to go through a lot of complexity and keep the focus on what is very important. So no, I really love the topic today, and I want to thank Ambassador Reka for inviting me and Professor for inviting me. I think, yes, some of your speakers here mentioned that unfortunately a lot of times Balkans has a kind of a bad reputation in the world about what happened in our recent history. But I think there is a lot more that we can bring, starting from technology and innovation and also a lot of other stories. I mean, just like Mergim and Daniela mentioned, a lot of other local stories that you don't hear them every day in international news or international context. So I think these are very important stories, and I try to kind of get involved a lot in a region while I'm here in Boston, and many times I bring professors and international students or professionals to Kosovo, our region, and they are pleasantly surprised. I mean, when they see the reality, when they see how like Daniela was mentioning, people, live from different cultures, different religions, live in harmony. They share their space together. They are very welcoming cultures, in general, good food, good climate. And people really get surprised that, like, you know, we never we always think of Balkans when we think about wars and conflicts and hate and separation and all that, but it's so I think there is a lot more that we can do, and you know, Ambassador Rekas, it's a formal job to be ambassador, but I think each of us from the region, it's I think a duty also to be a good ambassadors of our cultures in our region, in terms of bringing the best from the region and sharing with the world. So very, very good topic. I had the pleasure, I studied at Harvard Kennedy School, and I had the pleasure to meet Professor Nye in person, and this concept really, it's really powerful. Unfortunately, nowadays, you know, we see that not a lot of, here in U.S., but around the world, we don't see a lot of focus on this concept. We are seeing a much more shift to hard power, right? But I hope that each of us with a little bit of contribution can help to bring back the focus on this work, where people, you know, rely more on shared values and what brings them together instead of what inspires them, instead of what separates them. So thank you so much. A pleasure to be here today, and I look forward for the rest of the discussion.
Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing your ideas, your thoughts. And now may I invite Arturo Pagan to please facilitate the conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of the presenters. Interesting. I wanna approach this conversation from a different lens or a different perspective, right? So you have all been sharing with us examples of the soft power of the Balkan nations in sort of trying at least to have that voice, right, within the larger world and create a space, whether it's entrepreneurship or technology and so on. In preparing for the session, I did just reading, you know, in terms of like soft power in the region, right? And it was fascinating that what I found was the importance of the region in a crossroads between the East and the West, right? So one of the articles regarding Iranian influence, right, in the Balkans says, you know, we see the Balkans as being the Eastern world in the West. From the Iranian perspective, they're hoping that serves as a sort of port of entry, right, to the larger Europe and to markets. And this has included, you know, supporting particularly countries like Serbia that were dependent on oil and chemical fertilizers from Russia now after the war. They're trying to influence that, but they're also trying to do soft influence in terms of religious influencing by catering to the Muslims, by supporting the Faculty of Islamic Studies in Sarajevo in support of the Shia community. They are sort of balanced by the support of Saudi Arabia in Wahhabism in the region. Russia traditionally has focused on its shared sort of Slavic and Orthodox heritage to influence some type of power or sort of cultural sort of, communism across the board in some countries, and particularly in Serbia. Serbia has sort of purchased arms, air defense systems, drones, and Russia has provided Russian military-style training for the younger people within Serbia, and also looking at the relationships within the Russian Orthodox Church and the charity groups, which may have an affinity, let's say, towards Putin in that area. And we all know that during COVID, a lot of countries supported their own vaccines, and then they also supported the building of hospitals and providing a lot of medical support and equipment that wasn't, easily accessible. Turkey, the other country, has really focused on those historical and cultural connections and the shared Ottoman Empire history, trying to influence culture through soap operas, the textile trade, and also through, investment in health systems as well. And the Chinese, not only through their sort of Belt and Road Initiative, but also infrastructure projects, that diplomacy, they're increasing their partnerships with some countries that allow sort of public television airing of Chinese programming, within the region, as well as they did provide vaccines. They're, sort of invigorating their sister city network between the Chinese cities and the cities in the Balkans. So I guess my question to you there is, obviously there's a geopolitical lens at this as well, which is, the desire of many of these countries to join, full union with the European Union and NATO. Obviously, you have a little bit of pushback coming over from the Russian side, but it means that it is a region, right, that is incredibly, it's sitting on a lot of power that it yet hasn't realized. So how do you see that playing out in terms of the future of the region and this concept of just, using their soft power to really have an influence or a greater influence now, because they are at the crossroads of the East and the West. So over to you.
Okay, will you request, Ambassador, you would like to give a shot?
That's it.
Okay.
You're put on the spot.
Yeah. Anyone would like to address this big, very broad, historical, at the same time, complex question? How do we move forward? Yes.
Me, I'm sorry, I have a big mouth. So.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah. Arturo, I think that the points you're raising are very interesting. I'm going to cite two of them and explain my reasoning behind them. I view the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative in its internal mechanics as a good example of not using soft power. Because fundamentally, although the Chinese see it as a kind of diplomacy, in practice it ends up being very transactional. There is a very, very clear delimiter that the Chinese are buying at a low price, either raw materials or contracts in exchange for development of, for example, rail lines. This is very common in Northeast Africa. And I'm fearful that the Chinese approach to this kind of initiative is a good example of soft power not working, precisely because it is very transactional. And I think that one of the things that I've always thought about that is important is whether or not the Balkans as a region see themselves as internally self-aligned, developing standards that are global standards, or whether they're simply jockeying for position within the broader EU. In other words, is the purpose of development in the Balkans entirely EU-focused, or are there internal opportunities for standards that supersede or are just different than EU standards, but matter in a global context? And I'll give a good example as a counter. In 1973, North Korea, compared to South Korea, this was 20 years after the Armistice Agreement, North Korea was seen as the more developed economy of the two. South Korea was quite backward. South Korea began a very, very specific and weird strategy, really of soft power, by sending and paying for thousands of PhD students to come to the U.S. to do PhDs in electrical engineering. And this is well documented in business schools. This is the case, of leapfrogging that began in '78, where they took one industry, which was chip manufacturing, and they used it to accelerate their economy. So they created a set of standards that were above and beyond even those of the U.S. and use it as a springboard. So I think that, when we look at issues of development, process complexity really, really, really matters, because it changes the calculation from who do we bring in to what standard do we develop that is unique in the world in an area that matters more than anybody else. And a good example of when this doesn't happen, counterexample, in 1983, the Finnish government made a deal with the Soviet Union, 78. They made a deal with the Soviet Union to buy a nuclear reactor from the Soviets. It was the first time the Soviets were able to sell a reactor outside of the Eastern Bloc. And they sold two what are called VVET cold water reactors to the Finnish government. The Finnish government wouldn't buy them unless the Soviets agreed to have the metal made according to American ASME, American Society of Mechanical Engineers standards. So there were substantial modifications required, but what's fascinating is that the Finnish government didn't mind the reactor tech. They really cared about the process by which the metals were made inside the reactor parts. And they insisted on a third-party verification of those parts. And they eventually built it, but it was a kind of weird Frankenstein reactor. It had an American core top to it. It was very strange looking. But the point I'm making is that there was a real process complexity on the part of Finnish nuclear engineers that caught the Soviets off guard. And I see in each case that where we do develop radically different markets and technologies, it's because there is a process complexity behind it. I'll give you one last example. In the U.S., 24 U.S. states currently already have on the books laws regulating spaceports, New Mexico being the first. So U.S. states individually are planning for a very broad kind of space-based travel and passenger system, and the laws are there. That complexity has been thought about already. So if you as a company are coming into aerospace tech, your risks are much lower going into one of those states versus the other. And I think that nuanced understanding of looking at process complexity in specific domains is a great way to accelerate development. Yeah, I'm going to shut up now. That's all I want to say.
Something that you mentioned, it provokes me, Arturo, if you could. Mergen, are you there? Mergen Kahani? It's kind of, I'm trying to join them together. Earlier, Dr. Jusak talked about foreign direct investment and also innovation. And also supply chain within the region itself. Is there an opportunity for building up soft power?
Is that for me or for?
For you, Mergen.
Yeah. Let me try because I think I still echo.
Try
Is
up
it
the
better
volume.
now? No echo? Is it good?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Yeah,
Okay, excellent.
yeah.
So, opportunities from FDI and supply chain for soft power.
Yeah.
I think absolutely, but before I go into it, I'm just going to build a little bit on the process complexity that was mentioned earlier. I think Bob will stay for Airbnb, wouldn't stay for that, not because of just the ratings and everything else, but I think within that process complexity, I think it has to do with a lot of culture in society.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are still places in Kosovo where even if you go without Airbnb app and you're left, we were speaking to a friend of mine as we were driving, we were like, what happens if you are stuck in the middle of the road in some village in Kosovo? At 3 a.m. you would knock on the door and ask for shelter and food. I think you would get that in without the app and reviews. So I think culture plays a big role on that process complexity, and paradigm shift I think is very critical to this point. And I think that's exactly what the soft power from the tech and innovation perspective we are trying to do. Supply chain is one example where we have over 500,000 unique SKUs that we sell online, that's unique products. And we have to deal with a lot of distributors globally from different manufacturers from all over the world. And a lot of times supply chain is not the most effective route or the shortest route. It's actually more EU, non-EU, Balkans type of transition, which makes it not the most efficient and increases cost, thus provides a certain disadvantage to Kosovo in particular, but also the region. Again, I say Kosovo because we are more active in Kosovo, even though we operate in Albania and North Macedonia as well. So as we move forward and we get better influence from foreign investors, and we get better featured, like tomorrow we expect we are going to be featured in one article in a French magazine. We expect to be open in one of the top magazines. I'm sure that will actually help us get better deals, improve our supply chain, lower the prices for the consumers, because this increases trust. I cannot mention some of the top companies, but likely it's top 5 brands in the world, if not top 3. We're speaking to them, and until just a few weeks ago, we were unable to convince them to be directly present in Kosovo. And because of the recent movements with some investors, actually they are now convinced, because we got, in a way, a vetting source of reputation and credibility. Even though we are 100% US company and we operate in Kosovo, Albania, and North Macedonia as branches or subsidiaries, it's very hard to get the deal done. It has to do sometimes, or the answer is it has to do with distribution channels, or it has to do with legislation, it has to do with you have one distributor for the whole region or the whole Southeast Europe, like Daniela said. But often the real reason is preconceived ideas and perception of the region. Yeah, market size, we understand that that's a typical answer, but really when you look at it, in our case at least, I can speak in our case more often as opposed to the whole ecosystem of every other sector, but in our sector, typically we see that it has to do with the region. Without making it too vulgar or aggressive, the way it was when I came back from New York to Pristina and I was speaking to foreign investors, we have a lot of super angels from US, but when I was speaking to some of the European investors, one of them verbatim told me, quote unquote, if I come with a car, would you steal my car there, right? When somebody steal my car in the region. So we have to combat that. As we have more investors and as we have more foreign companies present, it's helping us a lot. I'll give you a very concrete example. There is, in Kosovo, there was no food delivery until a month ago. Wolt came in. Wolt is a food delivery in Europe from Sweden, I believe. And all of a sudden, it impacted us positively to other investors who saw that news because now they see this is working. A few months ago, SpaceX launched Starlink in Kosovo. It was a big move. So these kind of moves and positions actually do help as a soft power overall. It seems small, but eventually it does open doors a lot and it makes a big difference for us. But again, it's not just one country, it's the region. And like Professor earlier mentioned, he said, where is our position internally within Balkan countries in Europe or globally competitive? And I think that's a very good point. If we look at historically, I think we have certain advantages of producing, especially in tech, that can have a global impact, not just internal alignment within Balkans or even Europe. As of today, I know at least 5 companies who are building things in Pristina that are globally competitive everywhere and being actually commercially used. So there is a capacity to have a global impact because with IT, it's a matter of quality as opposed to quantity. We don't have 100,000 developers or software engineers. We might have 5,000 of them, let's say, whatever the number is, but I think we can produce the output is much bigger. And I think that's where the soft power relies in Kosovo and all the countries in this region.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could come back to your presentation, you highlighted the young population. Could you elaborate a little bit on young population in what way, where you could see, not only in Kosovo, but also in the whole Balkan region? And connecting with what Mergin was talking about, technologies and all.
Yes, it's a fact that Kosovo population is the youngest in Europe. Statistically, I could not say precise data, but it's more than 60% is under 30 years. If you have that fact, and if you have that they are well-educated young population, I'm not speaking only well-educated in Pristina's university, but we have so many young people who are in studies in United States, in European Union, and other countries. The third crucial fact is they are all almost 95% or almost 100% English speaking population. Besides of speaking also German, French, Italian, but English is like mother tongue. And finally, one very important fact is that they are very, very talented IT young people who not just are connecting to new actual global trends of ICT, but there are also good programmer, there are also writer of concept of IT. I'm not familiar with that profession like dean, but I know that very young people in Kosovo are working for global companies, not only from Pristina, but also they're working in the United States and in Europe. So all this, if you have these all four facts, create one important tool that Kosovo maybe have no oil, maybe have no natural gas, maybe have no diamonds, but have one rich human resources, rich human capital, which could be used in the future. It is used almost now, but I think it is also some very good basement for further economic development of Kosovo.
Thank you very much. Arturo, you want to further this question a little bit? Because
sure. I want to ask the ambassador, what are the plans that Kosovo has to market this incredible power? From our perspective, so, UNFPA works on reproductive health, and we know that our heads of offices in the region are amongst the best that we have, right? They're articulate, they're smart, they know how to sell our mandate, and so when they come for an opportunity for growth within the organization, they are quickly, absorbed by other countries and other regions because they want that sort of know-how that comes particularly from the Balkans to be shared in similar contexts across the world. Just in terms of looking at television and media campaigns, right? Croatia is fantastic at sort of advertising the beauty that it has to try to increase tourism going to Croatia. So, and we know, and we noted that, particularly when the UK left the EU, Ireland stepped up and said, look, we have a highly educated English-speaking population. Come and invest here in Ireland, right? So what is Kosovo going to do to really sort of increase its presence and change that reputation, perhaps, on if I take my car, is it going to be stolen, into one to say, look, we have an incredible, base of human capital here that you can use. So, very good question to know what Kosovo will be doing in the future.
Any thoughts?
So, the best answer to your question is exactly the success of Jarafa and Mergem Zahani.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the example how from one small country, even came from the war in 90s, we have one excellent company, which is, I think, is not only Kosovo company. In the global scene is also one world company, which every day is improving its services, and this is, but Jarafa is not only one. I mean, Mergem maybe know better because he is in this industry, in his sector. I'm not, I'm just diplomat. But I think you have to compare the Kosovo case with the human capital and resources, with the Ireland and with the Finland. We know that Finland is also one country which was 1 century ago under Russian or Soviet occupation. It's in the north, have no natural resources like energy and so on, but they create something which is brain developing industry, Nokia and so on, and they are now number one. Ireland is also one successful story. From one conference which I participated in 5 or 6 years ago, one expert from Ireland told us that Ireland was one of the most country from where almost all population emigrate to United States and so on. Even if it's maybe it's not correct facts, but even he mentioned that more Irish people live outside of Ireland than in Ireland. But based on very successful policy strategy of Irish government, they introduce new programs and stimulate Irish to come back to return home. Of course, the second factor is that accession of Ireland to the European Union and using the fund, cohesion fund, structural fund, regional funds, which develop the country. And Ireland, I think, together with Poland, have the highest rate per capita of increasing of usage of European Union funds and developing their economy. I mean, Poland and Ireland are the highest economic growth rate.
Yeah, Poland's about 8% every year.
Something
they're
like
quite
that.
stable.
So maybe using these comparative cases, successful story, from not big country, from not hard power country, but their soft power experience, and Kosovo will become maybe one Balkan soft power tiger. I mean, in good sense of the wording. So, of course, we could discuss more and more, but I think we have this to conclude. We are proud that we have young, well-educated generation, IT skilled, and very and absolute English speaking. So this is our potential. This is our resources of Kosovo. Of course, we have also energy sector, and we have also metal mining and so on. But there are more or less hard power, hard industry. I'm talking about the new development and, let's say, a new brain industry for 21st century.
Arturo, you gave a long overview of the Balkan long-term history with all this kind of tapestry. So I was wondering if Daniela could comment in storytelling how this tapestry becomes a resource in relationship building. If you don't build relationships across the countries in the Balkan region, then whatever ideas or products we don't. So storytelling is do you think is a good way to build relationship across the boundaries?
Thank you for that question. I'm still mulling over Arturo's very nice recount there, and I cannot help to know that behind in his posters it talks about youths that can make a difference. And this reminds me of my young self, who was 16 years old, defiant against the former regime, coming to the United States with $200 and not even a high school diploma all by myself, because I believed in that dream. And I think the dream that we've been selling to our youth is go abroad to make a living or to make something out of you. And now what do we tell the young generation that are all over the place there, that we don't have to leave to find opportunities that we can do. So I do think it is about, I think Professor Mark said something earlier. If you, Professor Mark, ask a question, not what happened, but how it happened, then I will ask the question, who gets to tell that story? And for too long, I think the Balkans have been defined by others, be it historians, politicians, news headlines, and I felt that reading about what was happening and being outside, for the most part, I always felt that conflict was always about culture. But how do we tell these stories? It's more than just a recounting of events. I think it's an act of power. So geography, I think Arturo talked about geography. Geography has defined the Balkans as both a bridge and a battleground. So it's a place where civilization meet, but it's also where empires have collided. Everybody wants a piece of that beautiful coast or those mountains or the mines that we have and things like that. So it has shaped the region's politics, economy, identity. One thing that I often say, and my husband notices this when we're traveling, how malleable people from the Balkans are. And I'll just give you a couple examples. I go in Italy and I speak with my directing traffic hands, as he tells me, and I feel more Italian than the Italians. I go to the Middle East and I feel the connection with the Arabic world because, we do have Ottoman eyes, as again, somebody would tell me. We go to the east, to the Slavic part, and we have the roots of that. We go to Austria-Hungary, we grew up with the desserts that we were eating, and we can go beyond and beyond. So what does Balkan mean? I really think it's a composite of all these layers, and that doesn't make it any simpler. That sometimes has internal conflict even among our own selves, like what do we, are we more Mediterranean, are we more Nordic, are we more this, are we more that? But I think when we harness all that power, I think we can actually be individual. So who gets to tell the story, and what is the path for our regions? Is the path, and I maybe sound very provocative now, what future, and I'm sorry, the light keeps coming off. What I wanted to say, people say the geography is destiny, right? And we say this to many other countries in the world, but is it really? Is the Balkans, if you have been throughout the history called as crossroads between East and West, implying that sometimes East is bad and West is good. Are we East of the West of the East? Depends who you ask and whichever day. Are we North of the Maghreb? We can slice the planet in many different ways, but I just think, what is a crossroad? Is it a place where we just cross through in an airport or in a train station, or is it a destination by itself? Do we actually have to choose where we go, or can the Balkans be a destination in and of itself? Do I have to choose to leave to become someone, to be seen as a young woman who has a dream, who maybe wanted to go into computer programming, which we didn't have any of it, and if it was mainly dominated by men, not to again get into gender here. But do we really have to, can we be a center of influence in our own right? And that's not to be, I guess what I was saying earlier about not being collaborative and not fitting in something bigger, but I think we need to have our own identity before we can try to fit something bigger. Geography has historically positioned Montenegro as that, and the whole former Yugoslavia, the whole Balkans, but I still believe that it's our population is now more and more outside. We have such a widespread diaspora. I always joke around that I live in the second largest Montenegrin city called New York City, because there's actually more Montenegrins living in New York City than they live in my hometown where I come from. Now again, that could be a good thing or a bad thing or a sad thing if people left because of that. To me, it's just a thing, it's just a fact. So how do we actually network beyond? How do we actually leverage this power of youth, of history, of innovation, I just think it's stitching us together. I think we're very fragmented. We talk about new nations, we're not new. Not new, maybe we're new in this formation, but history has been there for thousands of hundreds of years. We have stories to tell. We have great things that we have forgotten. I know I grew up thinking that a store-bought marmalade was somehow better than the homemade jam that my grandmother would make, which was actually organic and natural. I come to the United States to go to the farms in Long Island to buy that jam 10 times the price because it's now all of a sudden wonderful and homemade. So the stories we tell ourselves that somewhere else is better, I'm not so sure whether that narrative is still a good one. So I'm really encouraged today to hear these local stories, local innovation, local people, because we need to appreciate what we have before we can actually try to be part of something bigger. And this whole path of EU, where does it take us? Are we going to be in the antechamber, in the waiting room of the EU for another, I don't know how long? Or are we going to try to see what other opportunities and possibilities we have to play with the wider region? And I'm not sure what the answers are. I'm not even sure that I know what the questions are, but I do know that I'm incredibly inspired by the youth that is really trying to say enough. We fought for independence. We have all these flags. We have our nations. We fought for democracy and fair elections and all of these things. But are we still somehow not enough? Do we still need to be somewhere else? Can a Kosovo passport or Montenegrin passport or Albanian passport or any other passport carry the same weight as if I were to become French or become naturalized to another nationality that maybe give me more power? And I think this is, again, bring it down to the young boys and girls of the region who are actually just waiting for a chance to be able to show what they can. And the education system we have had was great. I hope that some of the things that we had in the past we actually don't throw away with all these new things, but that we embrace new technologies, new networks, new possibilities to just present what we have to offer. And I think, Arturo, to your point, I see people from our region in international organizations really with very little kind of practical know-how thrown into the situation. As I said, even to myself, I hear sometimes, well, how do you know this? That's what Balkan resilience is all about. We actually had to know how to ride a bike when we were dreaming what a bike looks like, because maybe we didn't grow up with one. But we are resilient, we are kind of almost tenacious and unapologetically defiant to the world. It's not possible. And I think that is a beautiful energy to be harnessed. And I'm getting a little bit passionate here, so I'll stop now. So who gets to tell the story? Who do we tell it to? And how do we actually rebrand ourselves? Not to be someone who we are not, but to really stitch all of that rich cultural milieu that we have carried for centuries. And I think that's what makes us beautiful. And this talk here happened because people were willing to sit around the table and share different perspectives. But a news brief from that could be, oh, look, they're from the opposite side. They used to be a country, now they should be feuding. News will probably not tell what really happened in this beautiful energy collaboration here today. And I will be the one who will be actually always highlighting that progress happens because we sit around the table and talk about our own experiences and own dreams and dare to imagine the world that it could be, not just what others tell us it was or should be. Thank you.
Please. Yeah.
I will try only to summarize what Daniela said in only 2 words. The story of the Balkan is the story of the clash between geography and history. I could not further go in this elaboration, I elaborated in my book, but this is the main problem, that always geography did not correspond to history, and history not to geography, and that's why we have change of the border, history of wars, and so on. But this is a different question. I wanted to remain you one issue which we didn't discuss today, which is very important for young human capital and resources. This is a problem of brain drain. How to stop export of our brain from Balkan to European Union, to the United States, and how to stimulate, to motivate these young people to stay and to work in Balkan. This will be a big challenge and big problem for future policy strategy.
I actually have a lot to say about this. Sorry, this is probably not part of the conversation, but I was thinking about exactly this question. The question to me was not how many young people are in Kosovo, but how many young people does Kosovo attract who aren't from Kosovo, right? And the question to me wasn't, is brain drain the problem? It's what can a Kosovar government do deliberately and uniquely that alters the playing field? And there are, I think, in different spheres, fantastic examples of what works for young people, where having really a kind of process complexity, but having like sort of, a series of maybe internal forums, internal conversations, and saying, all right, let's look at best practices where things matter to the youth. For example, I'll give you 5 examples. Vienna has probably one of the best practices in public housing. Viennese government, as a city government, allocates the largest percent to making public housing cap at 10% of monthly income. So the Viennese government uniquely invests in owning and operating apartment houses, and they have a model that says, we're going to cap expenses at 10%. We want young people to invest in things other than rent. So it's a very unique model, even within the EU, right? Another example, Delaware, right, has probably one of the best courts systems for corporations and LLCs. If you have a problem, you can go to a judge and solve it in 24 hours. I don't know of any court in Europe where you can solve something in 24 hours. Don't know of it, right? I would love to have that. I'd love to know that as an LLC in tech, if I have a problem legally, I can solve it tomorrow, not in 6 months. That'd be an amazing comfort for me, right? If I go to Iceland, Iceland has the Modern Media MMI initiative. This is the Modern Media Initiative. Iceland has been incredibly invested in advanced digital media privacy law. They're very heavily interested in creating future models of digital media law that accommodate advanced technologies, far better than the EU, for example, even. And there's been a lot of progress done in Iceland about it. So I think that, having a kind of roundtable where the Kosovo government says, look, let's see what works in the world. Why do young people go to certain places? And what kind of systems that are really simple, these don't require money, they require changes in thinking. They require changes in ideas of what that society looks like. Can we do that become incredibly attractive? Like if I'm 25 years old and I'm working in Warsaw, I'm a Polish citizen, why am I going to Germany or London? They pay more. But I don't think about the fact that the rent is more and the food costs more, right? I don't think about that. And I go because it's been marketed, but when I actually end up there, I'm in the same situation. And it's only when you start digging like below the surface and asking these deep questions about how very, very simple changes to internal practices can affect these like larger outcomes. I just think that like Kosovo is an amazing place to attract youth, but it's only going to happen if these like very microscopic, minor changes in ideas of interactions occur. So that's all I want to say.
No, in fact, I'm coming back to the question, and this grand picture, that historical perspective that Arturo gave us, kind of has a history of tensions, history of coming together. But I think, do you think there has to be some kind of a deliberate effort on relationship building, especially among the young people? Ambassador talked about music, the singers, and all of them. Are they, these are sports, are they instruments or tools of relationship building? Daniela?
I think so. I think I'm tempering with these things. Why would people return? I'm thinking, because that's my perspective of many people who left, some voluntarily, some not. Why would they return? And my question always was, and when I'm talking to ambassadors and people of influence, people should not feel that they want to return out of obligation or out of cultural ties. I mean, that's part of it, right? But I think about what's in it for me. Where is the space for young people in the Balkans today? If we are going to continue, for example, to favor somebody's diploma from Cambridge over somebody's diploma from Pristina University, for example. I think we got to invest into, of course, building cadres. There's a lot of, I know, diplomatic academies now. Montenegro, I know Kosovo is making one. I think there's quite a lot of possibilities to invest in what we have. And again, not to compete, not to be what is bigger or better. I think the world goes wrong when we always try to compete what is bigger and better. There is space on this planet for many different voices, and I don't think we should all be sitting around the table sounding like we are all from the same place when we're not. But where is the space for me? Where is that sense of belonging in a society that is still largely divisive? Let's face it, we cannot tiptoe around. I know we didn't talk about things because here we're very proud. We don't want to talk about corruption. We don't want to talk about nepotism. We don't want to talk about some of these other areas that are plaguing our societies and many other societies that are very, let's say, small and intimate, right? How do we actually focus on meritocracy? How do we make sure that our government looks as diverse as the population that it represents? And many, many other things. So I think people will stay and people will return, and newcomers will come when we show them an opportunity. Opportunity, as Professor Mark's saying, for housing, or opportunities for jobs, opportunities to create. I'm an artist. I was always ridiculed for my art. Oh, finish a smart university. Art is not a profession. Art is a hobby. I mean, people who were telling me that did not tell me that because they didn't like me or they hated me. They just kind of knew as an artist, you're going to be starving artist. That, I turn out, is true wherever you go in the world. But I think some of these narratives that we tell our youth, not that it's bigger and better across the sea or across the mountain, but that we have something here to offer that we're incredibly proud of. When somebody touches it, we're defending it with all might, but then we're very self-critical. We criticize our airlines, we criticize our ports, we're just born to criticize things sometimes. So I do think that part of that is what kind of a narrative do we have for ourselves? What kind of, in talking about not just in historic sense or geographic sense, but really in the sense of opportunity. How can we strengthen this culture in creative industries? Because youth engagement thrives where there's art, where there's music, where there's film scenes. How do we invest in the creative industries? For example, Serbia's Exit Festival in Novi Sad. Novi Sad is on a cultural map now of Europe and beyond, because they invested in that. But it wasn't easy, because for many, many years that was called a noise, and all these people are coming in, and drunk Irish youth is coming, and all of that stuff. But actually, if you get over that hump and kind of invest in some of these cultural events, I think people will come. People will come if nothing else to break the stereotypes they may have. And I do not know a single person that has visited the Balkans, in small or in large part, that didn't come back talking about wonderful things, about nature, about food, about hospitality. So how can we get these narratives in that we actually feel that there are opportunities for that? And this is why I'm looking to the ambassador and to many people who are in the power to be able to kind of help us shape this narrative so that we actually can not just talk about how great it is, but how do we actually invest and how do we invest in startups, in digital infrastructure, because young people actually want flexibility, they want creativity, they want access to technology. And our system, let's face it, a lot of our systems are still very archaic, very parochial, very heavy. Even though we're modern democracy, we have the remnants of the very heavy kind of apparatus of the past that maybe is still lingering on. So perhaps, I don't know, that's what I'm just thinking about. What is there in the offer that is beyond the emotional ties and beyond the culture and beyond of that? What else is there for me to return? So if I'm married to a foreigner, then we come back. How do we attract younger people as companies as well to get also some of the foreign capital as well? And not have that brain drain that I kind of alluded to when I'm talking about the largest cities, Frankfurt's and Buenos Aires of this world, and I don't know, many others. Vienna, you go to Vienna, you're more likely to hear one of the Balkan languages than you are to hear German. And this is the reality of that. And they're all happy working the jobs that they wouldn't not do if they go back to where they come from, because they say, here I'm free, here I can express myself, here I can challenge my manager or my boss. And back home, I'm not able to do that. It's do as I say. So I don't know, I'm just bringing like some of these elements of like, how do we actually need to change some of the systems and some of the ways of thinking and the complexity of those systems to see where there's room for cross-generational workforce to thrive together. I don't know if I'm answering the question or throwing more questions on the table, but I think these are the things that I'm grappling with as I'm thinking about this conundrum.
Oh, definitely. Thank you. And this is an ongoing conversation. That's the whole point of this conversation, to keep the conversation going. And I purposely call it conversation instead of discussion. We don't discuss because it is intentional that it's called conversation. And so, Arturo, you want to unpack a little bit?
Actually, Basilio,
Yeah.
so we have someone that we can ask, right?
Yes.
So we have Mr. Kahani, who studied at St. John's, right, and went back. And so, like, what is your experience in going back, and how can we make your story more known so that people know that even if they leave to get educated abroad, they can come back and actually invest in the future of the country?
Yeah, thank you, Arturo. Let me do this. Okay, so no echo now, I believe.
Yeah, no echo, yeah.
For me, when I decided to come back after almost 12 years in New York, I had luckily achieved what one would call an American dream. I had a beautiful job. I was getting paid very well. I was living in Jamaica Estates, close to St. John's, where you're sitting now. I was an adjunct, so life was good. I really had a wonderful life. And then I looked back, and coming back to Kosovo often, I realized two things. One was the connection of my own personal history and the society overall, like the ambassador mentioned, the war and the difficulties. So, for instance, my high school was clandestine. So I attended high school in houses, and we did not have proper school objects. We had to hide our books under the shirts, and the police was chasing us if we had books in our hands. We were wearing 3 pairs of socks. I'm not exaggerating. This is the exact thing that was happening. And then when I started St. John's on January 4th, because I started in spring 2002, I landed in JFK. I was that bad. Not going to St. John's. And January 5th, I arrived at JFK at like 6 p.m. So when I started on spring semester, I remember as if it was today. I was walking on school at the campus by the library, going to Marillac, and I had the school bag. It was raining. I did not even feel it by the time I entered the class, because that was one of the times I could remember I could actually wear a school bag without being chased on. So that was one reason, some sort of connection. Although Daniela says, she said culturally we have to follow, we need to find a different reason on the culture. I think culture is an important piece. For me, that was the number one reason to return. The number two reason, the opportunity. I remember in New York at that time, Domino's Pizza had just started doing delivery online. But they did it innovatively because you could see it online, each stage of the phase, the process of the pizza delivery. It was even telling you who's making the pizza, right? So the name of the person who's making the pizza, the name of the person who's delivering your pizza. And I go back and I'm sitting in my room with my dad. It's like 10, 11 p.m. I forget I'm in Kosovo. And I open the laptop and I'm like, I want to order pizza. And my dad looks at me with the look of not to mean that that service does not exist in Kosovo, but with the look as if I had lost my mind. You know, he looked at me as if I'm haunting him, joking, because what do you mean you want to order pizza and you open the laptop at 11 p.m.? Are you okay? So that kind of gave me a realization that what is so obvious to developed economies, in that case in New York, and in other cases where internet penetration in Kosovo, even then, today it's about 100%, it's biggest, one of the biggest in the whole Europe. The connectivity, the macro infrastructure indicators existed for internet economy to flourish, but there was no supply per se to offer these services, but demand would be created automatically because the market was there. Internet penetration, yes. Young population, yes. Adoption, technology adoption is one of the fastest in the world. So it was the opportunity, the second reason. But to attempt to answer the question, why would somebody other than people from Kosovo return to Kosovo, I think the precondition is that the people who are from Kosovo or the region to return first, because nobody else would return unless you return to your own country. You cannot expect Jim from Texas to come to Pristina if Mergim from Pristina, from Kosovo, returns to Kosovo. And for that to happen, I'm an entrepreneur, so I see the things slightly different. I don't think the opportunities should come per se from somebody else. I think we should create them. Once we create our own opportunities, that opens the door for others to join that, but also for Jim or that Bob to come in and use that opportunity. And I think that has started to happen a little bit, not to the highest degrees, but it has started to happen. I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure if I was clear enough because of the echo, but we have a few unicorns in Kosovo, engineering offices in Kosovo. That's not small. That's the Bob and the Jim, or the Mergim and Elvin or Linda coming in. So the region has moved on from 2012 to 2025. On my experience since I came back, it has moved on drastically. So again, we are seeing a lot of movement, but the migration has become a more global topic. It's not just if you were to move something to work in tech globally, you would rather go to Bahamas or you would rather go somewhere where it fits you best. Why would you move to a landlocked country, in Kosovo in this case? So to conclude, I returned because I had connection with my country and society and the people. And I am a firm believer that if we don't work in our own place, we cannot accept others. We cannot expect others to come and work for us. If we don't build it, I don't expect others to come and build it for us. That's one. And two, the opportunity was there. There is very little competition. We have different challenges than working in New York. I had companies in New York. Some of them failed, one exit, but still the opportunities here are greater. Smaller market, but it's still big business to be made. So opportunity is here. And I don't think Jim and Bob will come unless Mergim and Linda comes first. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I just chime in, I just want to echo that, but I think we got to work to make place for Linda a little bit safer. And as a woman's voice here, I mean, okay, I'm a little bit older, so maybe my time to return was probably not in the most beautiful times of the 90s, right? The decade that I hope never repeats anywhere in the world. But I do think that we gotta look at other underlying issues that are there, because opportunities there, if we create them. Of course, I came to the United States and made something with my 10 fingers with even broken English, but I didn't have things going against me I was that Bob that arrived in JFK, 16 and a half years old, not even an adult. But I had a welcoming world. People didn't even know where Yugoslavia was. They didn't judge me for where I was from. I go back home and I try some of these ideas, including scholarships and things like that. And I'd be like, oh, you can do that in your America. So because I was seeing certain things that I wanted to bring there, like even the right to go to school, where maybe in some villages in traditional settings, girls were just not meant to go to school. They were meant to marry and have kids and not do that. So there are issues like domestic violence. There are issues like inequality and representation in the governments and things like that I do think we need as a society to address if we want the world to be at least equally open to everybody. And I know in the United States we have a huge pay gap, let alone in some other countries. So I think if we remain silent on these issues, we're going to be telling stories of success, which are great. I think they're inspiring, and I think more and more people will create those opportunities. And like again, they're certainly bigger now than they were 30 years ago and even 20 years ago. And I want to acknowledge that. I just want to make us not lose sight of the safety and women rights issues, of the workplace disparities and economic barriers, of the gender inequality and cultural norms, which are still there, and just lack of institutional support. I think the affordable childcare, the comprehensive reproductive health care, the things about balancing, motherhood and fatherhood with careers, something like that. I think I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of some of these systemic gender inequalities and things like. And they're getting better. I really think they're getting better from what I'm seeing and the way the society is addressing and tackling some of these norms. I just think we cannot. I did not return not because I didn't see opportunities. It was actually the other way around. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you very much, and I think we'll come to a close. Once again, thank you, Ambassador, for encouraging us to have this conference. Mergen, thank you so much, Mergen. You have to come here. We have to have you in person very soon. Mergen,
Be soon at St. John's, hopefully.
yeah, we have to have you here in person. Daniela, she's speaking to us from Geneva, and hope everything is good in Geneva there for you. And Professor Mark, thank you very much. Arturo, thank you for giving us this opportunity to have raised interesting questions as well. So, and all of you who have attended, thank you very much. We will continue this conversation, and please be ready for our next announcements coming through. Okay, Yandoli, thank you very much for your behind-the-scenes support, encouraging and joining us today. Thank you
so much.
Yeah, and thank you, Ambassador. No, thank you so much. Also,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So, my pleasure to invite you, and you hope to have a good lunch.
Okay.
Okay. Please join us. Mark?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Unfortunately I can't.
I see, okay.
I have something else to attend,
Okay.
but I have two little